My older brother returned from his business trip in Paris with 2 shopping bags. One held an Hermès Birkin in classic gold togo leather. The other a Chanel classic flap in black caviar. He went to my sister's bedroom first. By the time he made it down the hall to my room, both shopping bags were gone. All that was left in his hands was a box of hazelnut chocolates you could buy at any corner drugstore. I wanted to tell my fiancé, Colin, about it. I needed to vent. But when I tracked his location to the boutiques on 5th Avenue and walked in, I found him leaning against the glass display counters, agonizing over 2 necklaces. One was a Bulgari Diva's dream pendant. The other was a B.01 ceramic ring studded with diamonds. Which one should I give to your sister? He looked genuinely torn. My chest caved in. But I didn't dare go home to cry. Instead, I hid in a quiet, marble-tiled alcove near the mall's fitting rooms, pulling out my phone. I opened my messages and began typing through blurred vision to a guy I'd met in an online lobby 6 months ago. My brother called me greedy, but I didn't even ask for a bag. Am I really that greedy? Colin is supposed to be my fiancé, but he's buying high jewelry for my sister. Am I just being petty? The messages delivered. A moment later, a voice note popped up on my screen. Why don't you just be with me? However many bags, however many diamonds you want, I'll give them all to you. I'd only ever give them to you. And I promise, no one would ever call you greedy or petty again. I froze. The sheer shock of it literally stopped my tears. For half a year, I had been chatting with this person whose screen name was simply Gold. Their profile picture a blank white square. We had met through a co-op video game, and this was far from the first time I had cried to them. But usually Gold only ever typed back, offering patient, quiet comfort. I had always assumed Gold was a gentle, soft-spoken girl. That was why I felt so safe pouring my heart out. But the voice that just played from my phone was undeniably male. It was a deep, unhurried baritone, smooth and dangerously tender. A second voice note appeared. I pressed play. More than that. If you were ever in danger, I'd save you. Only you. I can promise you that much, the man's voice murmured, a quiet gravity grounding every word. Think about it. I listened to it again. A sharp ache flared at the bridge of my nose. The tears I thought I had stopped suddenly spilled over my lashes, hot and heavy. It wasn't that I loved to cry. It was just that, most of the time, I didn't know how to swallow the pain. When I was 5, my parents divorced. To better care for my chronically ill older sister, Bella, my mother took her across the country to live in Los Angeles. My brother, John, and I were left in New York with my father. 3 years ago, my father died in a multi-car pileup. Last year, my mother succumbed to breast cancer. But ever since John flew to California and brought Bella back to live with us in the New York townhouse, I realized I was no longer allowed to cry in my own home. Mia, your sister's heart condition acts up when she's stressed. Are you trying to make her sick? What are you even sulking about? Crying like that? How do you think it makes Bella feel? That was what John always said. After being scolded enough times, I didn't even dare pull the covers over my head to weep in the dark. When the weight of it became too much, my only option was to flee the house and hide in the white noise of a crowded public space. Colin was the match my father had arranged for me before he passed. Our families moved in the same wealthy circles, and it was a quiet, understood agreement. In the beginning, Colin used to look out for me. When he found out John was bringing Bella gifts every single evening and ignoring me completely, he would hold my hand and say, "Why don't we just get married the second you graduate? Once we're married, whatever you want, I'll buy it for you, okay?" When Bella took a liking to a wooden sculpture I had carved myself, and John screamed at me for refusing to give it to her, Colin had been furious on my behalf. "It's your art. Why the hell should you have to give it up?" he had told me. "Mia, don't you dare back down. You hear me?" That was how it was. Until 4 months ago, when John brought home a custom haute couture gown. I happened to be in the hallway when he handed the garment bag to Bella. I had only lingered for a second, my eyes catching on the intricate beadwork. Out of nowhere, John snapped. "Mia, have you ever lacked for anything in your entire life? Why do you always have to covet what belongs to your sister? Get out. Don't come back until you figure out what you did wrong." I sat on the limestone steps of our front porch for the entire night. The next morning, Colin came by to pick me up. Seeing me shivering in the autumn chill, he was immediately sympathetic. "It's just a dress. How could John kick you out over that? Mia, are you crazy? Why didn't you fight back?" But then, the heavy oak door opened, and John walked out, with Bella right behind him. Colin's voice died in his throat. He stared. That was the very first time Colin ever laid eyes on my sister. He turned to me, blinking like a man waking from a dream. "Mia, is this your sister Bella?" I gave a stiff, numb nod. And just like that, Colin's tone completely shifted. "Oh, well then this is on you, Mia. You really should learn to compromise for her." I caught a terrible fever that day. My body ached so profoundly I had no choice but to hide in my room, quietly wiping away tears while texting Gold about how much it hurt. But crying didn't change reality, because after that day, the frequency of Colin's visits to our townhouse suddenly spiked. His family was incredibly wealthy. Whenever he brought me a pastry or a gift, he suddenly started bringing a matching one for Bella. On my birthday, he gave me a pair of diamond studs. He bought a second box for her. He'd say, "Mia, I only get Bella things because she's your sister. Don't overthink it." But last month, John took Bella and me up to a luxury cabin retreat in the Catskills. Colin tagged along. The entire drive up, Colin's eyes were glued to the rearview mirror, checking on Bella. He asked her if she was cold, if she was hungry, if the winding roads were making her dizzy. He didn't ask me a single question. Later that evening, everything went to hell. A group of heavily intoxicated locals crashed the resort, starting a brawl and smashing the outdoor patio heaters. Colin immediately shielded Bella with his body. "Don't look, Bella. I've got you," he kept whispering. John didn't even hesitate. While physically holding back two aggressive drunks, he yelled over his shoulder, "Colin, get Bella to the SUV. Go." They rushed her to the car. Just as the heavy door slammed shut, one of the drunks lunged, grabbing my arm so hard I felt the bruise blooming instantly. John saw it happen, but he put the car in drive anyway. He rolled down the window just enough to shout, "Mia, wait right there. Let me get your sister to safety and I'll come right back for you." They never came back. When the men started smashing glass and throwing punches at the staff, a good Samaritan finally called the cops. In the end, it was a police cruiser that drove me home. When the officer dropped me off, the townhouse was completely silent. I was too terrified to go inside. I stood on the sidewalk for a long time, texting gold, letting the digital text ground me. When my breathing finally steadied, I limped my way up the steps and unlocked the door. I braced myself for the chaos. But the house was dead quiet. Bella was sick. The shock of the evening had triggered her palpitations. She had taken her medication and was fast asleep in her plush bed. Colin had just left half an hour ago, and John was sitting in a velvet chair by her bedside, keeping watch. No one was looking for me. When John stepped out into the hallway and saw me standing there, bruised and shivering, his expression barely shifted. "Glad you made it back safe," he said, keeping his voice to a low whisper. "Keep it down, don't wake your sister. Go wash up and go to sleep." The tears I had fought so hard to keep back nearly shattered the dam right then and there. When I went looking for Colin today, it wasn't actually to complain about John not giving me a Chanel bag. I was fine without it. Lately, I had been fine with having nothing at all. But yesterday, John had called me into his study. "Mia, the Carmichaels are a powerful family. Colin isn't the primary heir, but he holds his own in our circle," John had said, swirling a glass of scotch. "You're still young. There's no rush for you. But your sister's health is delicate, and I can tell Colin genuinely cares for her. I think it's best if you step aside and let Bella take this marriage arrangement." It wasn't a discussion. It was an eviction notice from my own future. I went to the mall today to ask Colin a simple question. Was this John's idea, or was it his? But Colin had been distracted from the second I found him. Even while holding the two luxury necklaces, he had asked, "Mia, which one do you think Bella would like more?" Standing under the harsh, brilliant lighting of the jewelry boutique, looking at his conflicted face, I suddenly had my answer. "Why don't you just buy both?" I told him quietly. "Give them both to her." And now, sitting in the shadowy corner of the mall, listening to the deep, steady voice of the man on the phone, I wiped the dampness from my cheeks. My heart settled into a strange, terrifying calm. I pressed the microphone button. "Okay," I whispered. "Let's be together." By the time I dried my eyes and took an Uber home, dusk had fallen. Colin and Bella were standing on the front porch. The amber glow of the gas lamp stretched their shadows long, blending them into one. I watched from the bottom of the steps as Colin, his face flushed, handed her the velvet Bulgari boxes. What was he saying to her? I was too far away to hear. Then Bella spotted me. Her face lit up with a practiced, radiant smile, and she practically glided down the steps toward me. "Colin, you bought these beautiful necklaces for me, but what about Mia?" she asked, her voice light and teasing. "Did you get anything for Mia?" Her cold, manicured hand reached out and grasped mine. She hadn't taken the boxes from him yet. She was performing the role of the protective, generous older sister. Colin froze. A beat of awkward silence hung in the air before he awkwardly reached into his tailored coat pocket and pulled out a flimsy, velvet pouch. "Of course. I got something for Mia too." Bella's smile deepened, as if she were genuinely thrilled for me. She took the pouch, pulled out a thin silver chain, and draped it over my wrist, fastening the clasp. Her eyes sparkled as she looked at me. "Isn't it pretty? It suits Mia so perfectly. Do you love it, Mia?" "No." A wave of intense, suffocating humiliation crashed over me. This bracelet. 3 months ago, for my birthday, Colin had given me the exact same one. He had told me then that he had spent hours picking it out. But today, standing at the jewelry counter, I had seen the truth. It was a promotional gift with purchase. The boutique had a whole drawer of them. "You got one if you bought a necklace. You got one if you bought a watch. You got one if you bought earrings. The $30,000 diamond bracelet Colin had gifted Bella on my birthday. The one she was currently wearing on her left wrist? That was fine jewelry. The identical promotional freebie, now resting against my skin, was an afterthought. Bella had to have known. She shopped at these boutiques constantly. Colin definitely knew. I didn't want the bracelet. I undid the clasp, pulled off the one I was already wearing for my birthday, and threw both of them into Colin's chest. As I turned and ran up the steps into the house, I heard Bella's soft, distressed sigh behind me. I'm so sorry, Colin. Mia didn't accept your gift. If I take these necklaces now, it'll just upset her even more. I wasn't an idiot. I could hear the subtle, poisoned needle hidden in those words. But I just didn't understand. If she wanted to play hard to get with Colin, why did she have to use me as the stepping stone? Even though our parents had divorced, whenever I spent my summer vacations in LA when we were little, she had been so sweet to me. When our mother scolded me for being messy, Bella used to hide me in her closet and read me stories. Why had everything changed the second she moved into my house? I slept with my head buried under the duvet that night. When I woke up, my eyes were swollen to the size of walnuts. I was sitting in the kitchen pressing cold spoons against my eyelids when our housekeeper, Martha, came rushing in. Mia, there are guests here to discuss marriage arrangements. Mrs. Carmichael is here. Hurry, go take a look. Mrs. Carmichael. Colin's mother? I blinked, confused. Martha was already pulling me up from the stool. Martha knew about the unspoken engagement my father had arranged with the Carmichaels. But she didn't know John was planning to swap Bella in my place. And she certainly didn't know Colin had already shifted his affections. Sure enough, when I reached the top of the grand staircase and peered into the living room, Mrs. Carmichael was seated on the velvet sofa. But she wasn't alone. Sitting opposite her was an incredibly elegant, strikingly beautiful woman I had never seen before. Seeing me on the landing, Mrs. Carmichael's smile turned brittle and strained. Oh, Mia is home too. At her words, the other woman's eyes lit up. A warm, genuine smile broke across her face. Are you Mia? I nodded slowly, my eyes sliding past the two matriarchs to look at John. I had never seen my brother look this ecstatic. He was practically vibrating with excitement, though he was trying hard to maintain a veneer of corporate humility. Well, we are in the 21st century now. We don't believe in arranged marriages in the traditional sense, John was saying, adjusting his cuffs. An alliance of this magnitude. I really must consult with my sister first. He turned to Martha. Go upstairs and bring the eldest Miss Davis down. The elegant stranger immediately held up a hand, halting him. The eldest? She asked, her brow furrowing slightly. No, there's been a misunderstanding. The girl our family is here to propose to is Mia. Mrs. Carmichael sat frozen, staring into her teacup, a humiliated flush creeping up her neck. A sharp prick of shock hit my chest. I instinctively looked at John. John's triumphant smile faltered. He looked incredibly displeased that Bella wasn't getting to choose between two elite suitors. He frowned at the elegant woman. Mrs. Astor, are you absolutely certain you mean Mia and not Bella? Before she could answer, a cold, authoritative voice drifted in from the grand entryway. We are certain. I whipped my head around. A man stood in the foyer, dressed in a sharp black overcoat and tailored trousers. His features were strikingly handsome, his eyes dark and unreadable. The woman I want, he said, his voice dropping an octave, is Mia. Teo Astor, the sole heir to the Astor dynasty. There wasn't a single person in New York high society who didn't know his name. His father was the chairman of Astor Holdings. His mother was old money New England royalty, a direct descendant of the Vanderbilt line. They were, without question, one of the top 3 most powerful families on the East Coast. Gold, was him? I stared blankly at the man walking into my living room. He was breathtaking. Broad shoulders, narrow waist. He looked like he had stepped straight out of a Tom Ford campaign. He stopped at the base of the stairs, looked up at me, and offered a soft, private smile. We meet again, Mia. The breath finally caught in my lungs. It was him. The voice was exactly the same. I lowered my eyes, my fingers gripping the mahogany banister to hide my trembling. We meet again. Theo's dark gaze flicked to my swollen red eyelids. For a fraction of a second, his jaw tightened. When he turned to look at my brother, the smile remained on his lips, but the warmth in his voice was completely gone. Mr. Davis, do you have a problem with my judgment? John offered a sycophantic, nervous laugh. No, of course not. Then why did I just hear you question whether Mia was the one I wanted? Did you assume I'm incapable of recognizing the woman I have feelings for? His tone was sharp, laced with a double meaning that cut through the room like glass. John's laugh turned stiff. He shot me a dark, covert glare. I couldn't tell if it was a warning or an accusation. How could I ever assume that? John muttered. Theo dismissed him entirely. He turned his attention back to me, and the ice in his voice melted instantly into something akin to a spring breeze. So Mia, he asked gently, this arrangement, do you accept? It felt like he was holding up the sky for me, like he was coaxing me out of a dark corner. For some inexplicable reason, an ache rose in my throat. I wanted to say yes. We had agreed to it last night. But the moment I opened my mouth, a frantic voice interrupted from the top of the stairs. Is that you, Theo? It was Bella. She had slipped out of her room and was now standing on the landing above me, staring down at Theo with a mixture of breathless joy and engineered shyness. Theo? Why was she speaking to him so informally? My chest tightened. My fingers gripped the banister harder. Bella had already composed her features into a picture of elegant grace as she descended the stairs, bypassing me entirely. 5 years ago, at the Ivy League debate tournament in Boston, I was the second speaker for the opposition. Do you remember me? Did Theo remember her? Was he going to be just like Colin? Was he going to see Bella shining in the spotlight and immediately forget I existed? Was he going to be like John? The second Bella entered the room, all the gravity shifted to her. I stared at Theo, my stomach tying itself into a sickening knot. But Theo just looked at her. His gaze swept over Bella's perfectly made-up face without a flicker of recognition. Without missing a beat, he asked in a voice made of absolute frost, "Who are you? And why on earth would I remember you?" Bella's radiant smile shattered. Seeing her shock, John desperately tried to salvage the situation. "Oh, so Bella and Mr. Astor are old acquaintances. Well, looking at it that way, it must be destiny that you two reunited in my home today." Destiny? But Theo came here for me. It felt like someone had poured battery acid straight into my chest. The sour, burning sting rushed right behind my eyes. Terrified that John would notice and reprimand me again, I ducked my head, trying to blink away the blurriness. Then Theo's voice sliced through the tension. "Mr. Davis, it was a collegiate debate tournament. By your logic, I'm destined to marry half the corporate litigators in Manhattan." He paused, and I heard his footsteps move closer to the stairs. "Mia." His voice was back to that soft, steady rhythm. I looked up, straight into eyes that held absolutely no doubt. "You haven't answered my question yet. Will you marry me?" It was as if a warm gust of wind had swept through the suffocating house, blowing away the dust and leaving nothing but sunlight. In that moment, I didn't care about John's suddenly furious expression. I didn't care about Bella, who was standing there pale and trembling on the verge of tears. All I saw was Theo Astor, waiting for me with a patient, reassuring smile. "Yes," I breathed out. "I will." My answer hung in the grand foyer like a thunderclap. John's face turned an unsightly shade of purple. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, his chest heaving as if he had just been slapped in front of New York's entire social register. "Mia!" John roared, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "Have you completely lost your mind? You're engaging yourself to a man you just met, right in front of Colin's mother? What kind of shameful, ungrateful child are you? A child who knows her own worth." Theo cut in smoothly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He simply shifted his posture, stepping slightly in front of me, his tall, broad-shouldered frame shielding me entirely from John's fury. Mrs. Astor lifted her chin, her eyes flashing with dangerous amusement as she looked at John. "Mr. Davis, I suggest you mind your tone when speaking to my future daughter-in-law. My family did not come here to listen to you berate the girl your late father entrusted to your care." "Mrs. Astor, you don't understand," John stammered, frantically trying to regain his footing as his eyes darted between Theo and his mother. "Mia is immature. She's impulsive. She's acting out because of a petty sibling rivalry. Bella is the elder sister. She's refined, educated, and currently standing on the stairs dramatically clutching her chest." Theo interjected, his dark eyes fixing onto Bella with icy contempt. Right on cue, Bella let out a breathless, tragic whimper, swaying precariously against the banister. "John!" Bella gasped, her voice fragile, barely a whisper. My heart. It hurt so much." In the past, the moment those words left her mouth, the entire house would spin out of control. John would drop everything, run to her side, call 3 private specialists, and scream at me for daring to exist in the same breathing space as her. John's instincts kicked in immediately. He turned to rush up the stairs. "Bella! Hold on, I'm coming." Colin's mother, Mrs. Carmichael, looked at the spectacle with sheer disgust. She stood up from the sofa, smoothing her designer skirt with sharp, abrupt movements. "Well," Mrs. Carmichael sneered, looking at John with open disdain. "It seems the Davis household is far too chaotic for civilized company. Since it's clear where your priorities lie, Mr. Davis, my family will formally withdraw from any discussions regarding a match with your house. Good day." She didn't even look at Bella as she marched out the door. John froze on the 3rd step, caught between chasing Mrs. Carmichael to save his business ties and rushing up to Bella, his face contorted in sheer agony. Meanwhile, Theo didn't give Bella a single glance. He reached out, his warm, broad palm gently wrapping around my cold fingers. Do you have everything you need here, Mia? Theo asked softly, his gaze resting solely on me. I looked at John, who was standing frozen on the stairs. I looked at Bella, whose eyes were wide with shock, her fainting spell forgotten as she realized her trick hadn't stopped Mrs. Astor or Theo for a single second. I looked at the house where I had lived like a ghost for 3 years. I have my passport and my art supplies in my room, I said, my voice steady and clear. That's all that actually belongs to me. Then let's go get them, Theo said. Mother and I will wait for you right here. John whipped his head around, his eyes wild. Mia, you are not leaving this house. I am your legal guardian until you finish university. If you step out that door. If she steps out that door, Mrs. Astor interrupted, her voice cool and cutting as diamond. She enters the protection of the Astor family. I advise you to review your late father's trust documents before you attempt to restrict her movement, Mr. Davis. Our legal team already has. John went dead pale. I didn't wait to see his reaction. I turned, walked up the stairs past a paralyzed Bella, and went straight to my room. It took me less than 10 minutes to pack my life into a single suitcase. My sketchbooks, my carving tools, my identification papers, and 3 simple outfits. When I walked back down, Theo was waiting at the foot of the stairs. He took the heavy suitcase from my hand effortlessly. As we walked toward the front door, Bella called out from the landing, her voice laced with desperate, bitter poison. Mia, if you leave now, don't you ever come crawling back when he gets tired of you. I stopped at the threshold. I turned around, looking at my sister and brother, standing together in the dimly lit hallway. I'm not leaving, Bella, I said softly. I'm finally going home. Theo's private estate was nestled in the quiet, rolling hills of Bedford, an hour outside the concrete noise of Manhattan. It wasn't a cold, sterile showcase like our New York townhouse. It was an sprawling, historic stone manor surrounded by ancient oak trees, glowing with warm yellow lights against the twilight sky. The interior smelled of old wood, beeswax, fresh lilies, and roasted coffee. Mrs. Astor had taken a separate car back to the family's penthouse in the city, giving us space. A housekeeper named Clara warmly guided me to a grand, sunlit suite on the 2nd floor, complete with a private balcony and a massive drafting table near the window. Master Theo had this room prepared for you 3 days ago, Clara smiled, setting down a tray of hot tea and fresh pastries. He said you needed a place where the light was right for your carving. I froze, holding the teacup. 3 days ago? Clara chuckled softly, nodding, before stepping out and closing the door gently behind her. I sat on the edge of the plush bed, my mind reeling. 3 days ago was long before I had texted him in the mall, long before John had told me to step aside for Bella. How long had he been preparing for this? A soft knock sounded at the open door. Theo stood in the doorway, having shed his heavy overcoat. He wore a simple, charcoal cashmere sweater with the sleeves pushed up to his elbows, looking relaxed, approachable, and breathtakingly handsome. Does the room suit you? He asked, leaning against the doorframe. Oh. I swallowed hard, setting the tea down. Why 3 days ago? Theo walked into the room, his footsteps unhurried. He pulled up a wooden chair and sat across from me, resting his forearms on his knees, looking into my eyes with an absolute, frightening sincerity. Because 3 days ago, you sent me a photo of a wooden sparrow you carved, Theo said softly. And in the background of that photo, on your desk, was a prescription bottle for a severe anxiety medication made out to your name, dated the day after your brother left you in the Catskills. My breath hitched in my throat. I knew your brother was a fool, Mia, Theo continued, his deep voice carrying a quiet, burning intensity. I knew your former fiancé was a spineless coward. But when I saw that bottle, I realized that if I didn't step in and pull you out of that house, they were going to extinguish you entirely. You looked at the background of my photo? I whispered. I look at everything that involves you, he confessed without a shred of embarrassment. For 6 months, I listened to you apologize for existing. I listened to you ask if you were greedy for wanting a birthday gift. Do you have any idea how hard it was to sit on the other end of a phone line and not drive straight to your house to tear it apart? A warm, overwhelming wave of emotion surged up my chest, stinging behind my eyes. For 3 years, I had believed that love was something you had to earn through endless compromise, silence, and self-effacement. I believed I had to be invisible so Bella could shine. Yet here was a man who held half the city's power in his palm, who had spent 6 months quietly watching over my shattered pieces, waiting for me to give him permission to hold up the sky for me. I don't have a grand inheritance, Theo, I said, my voice trembling slightly. John has been managing my father's estate. I don't even know how much of my trust is left. I don't care about your father's trust, Mia, Theo said, reaching out and gently taking both of my hands in his. His thumbs traced the faint calluses on my fingers, the marks left by years of holding carving chisels. I have my own empire. All I want is the artist who carved this. He reached into his pocket and set a tiny, hand-carved wooden sparrow on the nightstand beside my bed. It was the very first piece I had ever posted on the online forum 3 years ago, the one I thought had been lost in the mail when an anonymous buyer purchased it for $50. My eyes widened in sheer disbelief. You were the buyer? I've been your patron for 3 years, Mia. Theo smiled, a brilliant, breathtaking, private smile. And last night, I finally became your fiancé. While I slept peacefully in the quiet sanctuary of Bedford for the first time in years, the rest of New York high society was consumed by a quiet, violent earthquake. The news that the Astor family had formally proposed to the younger Miss Davis and completely snubbed the elder sister and the Carmichael family spread through the city's elite circles like wildfire. By Monday morning, the consequences hit. Colin Carmichael sat in his office at Carmichael Financial, staring blankly at a legal notice delivered to his desk an hour ago. The Astor Group had officially terminated its multi-million-dollar underwriting agreement with his firm. Furthermore, 3 major hedge funds tied to Vanderbilt interests had pulled their capital allocations, citing concerns regarding executive leadership and integrity. Colin's father, the chairman, had stormed into his office 10 minutes prior, throwing a glass paperweight against the wall, screaming that Colin's foolishness with the Davis sisters had cost the family 20% of its market value in a single morning. Colin frantically pulled out his phone and dialed John Davis. "John," Colin yelled the moment the line connected. "What the hell happened on Sunday? Why did Theo Astor show up at your house? Why did he propose to Mia?" John's voice on the other end sounded haggard, bitter, and utterly exhausted. "How should I know? The brat must have met him behind my back. She's been plotting this. Plotting this," Colin rasped, running a shaking hand through his hair. "John, father just stripped me of my lead partner title. He said if I don't fix this with Mia, I'm out of the firm entirely. Where is she? Let me talk to her." "She's not here," John spat out. "She packed her bags and moved into the Astor estate on Sunday. She didn't even leave a forwarding address." Colin froze. The Astor estate? She's living with him. "And that's not the worst of it," John growled, his voice tight with rising panic. "An hour ago, a forensic accounting team sent by the court arrived at my office. They have a judicial subpoena to audit our father's trust accounts. Mia filed a formal petition for a full accounting of her inheritance." "What?" Colin stammered. "Why would she do that? She never cared about the money before. Because Theo Astor's legal team is backing her," John shouted. "Colin, you need to come over here right now. Bella is having another episode because of all this stress, and I need help dealing with these auditors." Colin stared at his phone. For the first time, hearing that Bella was having an episode didn't trigger that protective, chivalrous urge in his chest. Instead, a cold, sickening realization began to settle in his stomach. Ever since Bella had returned to New York, his life had turned into a chaotic, downward spiral. He had given away Mia's gifts, insulted Mia's art, ignored Mia's tears, and thrown away an arranged marriage that had been built on years of quiet stability, all to play the savior for a girl who seemed to constantly demand luxury jewelry to soothe her fragile health. And now Mia, the girl who used to sit quietly beside him, the girl who asked for nothing, was engaged to the most powerful man in the state. Colin hung up on John without another word. He grabbed his coat, ignored his secretary's shouts, and drove like a madman toward the Astor Holdings corporate tower downtown. Colin arrived at the glass and steel monolith of Astor Holdings at 2 p.m. He shoved past the front security desk, demanding to see Theo Astor. But before he could even reach the executive elevators, 2 broad-shouldered men in dark suits blocked his path cleanly. "Mr. Carmichael," a calm, smooth voice called out from the lounge area. Colin turned. Theo stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, holding a leather folder, wearing a crisp dark suit. He looked composed, formidable, and entirely unbothered by Colin's dramatic entrance. "Astor," Colin shouted, trying to step past the guards, his voice echoing in the marble lobby. "I need to speak to Mia. You tricked her. She's young, she doesn't know what she's doing." Theo signaled the guards to step back slightly. He walked slowly toward Colin, his hands tucked casually into his trouser pockets. "Tricked her?" Theo asked, raising an eyebrow with quiet amusement. "Mr. Carmichael, if I recall correctly, you were the one giving $30,000 diamond bracelets to her sister while handing Mia promotional freebies from the jewelry counter." Colin's face flushed an ugly dark crimson. That was a misunderstanding. I got those gifts mixed up. I was going to give Mia the real ones later." "Were you?" Theo stopped 2 feet away from him. His height and posture completely dominated the space, casting a long shadow over Colin. And were you also going to get mixed up when you stood by and let her brother suggest she give up her engagement so her sister could have it? Colin choked on his own words. I didn't agree to that. You didn't object either, Theo said, his voice dropping into a register as cold and sharp as an iron blade. You sat at a jewelry counter agonizing over 2 Bulgari necklaces for Bella, while Mia was sitting alone in a hallway, crying. You had 3 years to treasure her, Carmichael. You chose to treat her like an afterthought. I loved her, Colin yelled, tears of frustration and humiliation welling in his eyes. We grew up together. Our fathers planned our wedding. Then your father planned poorly, Theo replied calmly. Because Mia is mine. Now. Legally, publicly, and permanently. Theo reached into his inner suit jacket pocket, pulled out an gold embossed card, and slid it into Colin's breast pocket. Consider this your formal notice, Mr. Carmichael, Theo whispered, leaning down slightly so his words reached only Colin's ears. If you, your family, or the Davis family come within 50 feet of Mia again, the Astor Group will not just pull its underwriting. We will initiate short positions on Carmichael Financial until your father's board votes to remove you permanently. Colin stared at Theo, his breath hitching in his throat, completely paralyzed by the sheer, absolute power radiating from the man in front of him. Theo turned on his heel, adjusting his cuffs, and stepped into the private executive elevator. Escort Mr. Carmichael out, Theo instructed the guards as the doors began to close. He's making the lobby look untidy. While Colin was being thrown out of Astor Holdings, the forensic audit at the Davis family estate reached its devastating climax. For 3 days, a team of 6 court-appointed forensic accountants and medical investigators, backed by the full weight of the Astor legal department, swept through John Davis's corporate and personal ledgers. What they uncovered was a massive, sickening web of fraud. At 4 p.m. on Thursday, John sat in the study of his townhouse, staring at the thick red folder sitting on his desk. Sitting across from him was Dr. Elizabeth Vance, the head of cardiology at New York Presbyterian, alongside a senior investigator from the district attorney's office. Mr. Davis, Dr. Vance said, her tone sharp and devoid of pity as she adjusted her glasses. I have thoroughly reviewed the medical files submitted by your sister, Bella Davis, for the past 3 years. John's hands trembled against his knees. She has severe hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Her heart is delicate. She can't be subjected to stress. Mr. Davis, Dr. Vance interrupted coldly. The ECGs and echocardiograms attached to her file from the clinic in Los Angeles were altered. The diagnostic charts actually belong to a 72-year-old male patient who passed away 2 years ago. John froze. His jaw dropped. What did you say? Your sister's actual cardiac function is perfectly normal, Dr. Vance stated flatly. Her palpitations and episodes are nothing more than mild anxiety symptoms, likely induced by the heavy anti-anxiety medications she has been illegally acquiring through private prescriptions. The room went deathly silent. No, John whispered, shaking his head frantically. No, that's impossible, Mom said. Mom told me before she died that Bella was fragile. Bella cried every night in LA. Your sister used a fake medical diagnosis to extract over $1.2 million from your late father's estate trust over 36 months, the DA investigator added, slapping a second document onto the desk. Furthermore, Mr. Davis, our financial audit shows that you illegally transferred $400,000 from your sister Mia's restricted trust account to cover Bella's personal credit card debts and luxury purchases in Europe last year. John's mind went completely blank. The walls of his study seemed to cave in on him. $400,000. He had taken his younger sister's inheritance, the money their father had left, specifically to protect Mia, and funneled it directly into Bella's luxury shopping sprees, all while screaming at Mia that she was greedy for looking at a designer bag. That's corporate embezzlement and breach of fiduciary duty, John stammered, his face turning paper white. Precisely, the investigator said, pulling out a pair of steel handcuffs. John Davis, you are under arrest. Just then the study door flew open. Bella walked in, wearing a delicate silk robe, holding a cup of tea, her face painted in her usual pale, sorrowful makeup. John, sweetie, Bella whined, her voice sweet and high. The auditors are making so much noise downstairs. Can you tell them to leave? My head is hurting again. She stopped mid-sentence. She saw the police officer. She saw the open medical files on the desk. She saw Dr. Vance looking at her with cold, professional disgust. Bella, John whispered, turning his head slowly to look at her. His eyes were bloodshot, filled with a horrific, shattering realization. The clinic in LA. The heart condition you lied to me? Bella's teacup slipped from her fingers. Crash. The porcelain shattered against the hardwood floor, hot tea splashing across her bare feet. John. Bella stammered, her fake fragile posture instantly collapsing into pure, unadulterated panic. John listened to me. I was scared. I thought you would love Mia more if I wasn't sick. I did it for us. You lied to me. John roared, throwing himself across the desk, knocking over his chair, screaming like a wounded beast. I gave you everything. Y threw Mia out in the cold for you. I stole my sister's money for you. You destroyed my life. The police officer grabbed John, pinning his arms behind his back as he thrashed, and wept hysterically. Bella backed away into the hallway, screaming as two more officers stepped into the foyer with a warrant for her arrest on charges of grand larceny and medical insurance fraud. The house that had been built on lies, cruelty, and stolen love crumbled to dust in less than 30 minutes. 6 months later, the spring sun shone bright and warm over the Chelsea Arts District in Manhattan. Outside the grand glass doors of the Astor Gallery of Modern Art, a massive silk banner hung high against the brick facade. Mia Davis, The Unbroken Thread, a solo exhibition of fine wood sculpture and architectural art. The gallery was packed with international art critics, high society collectors, journalists, and gallery owners. In the center of the main hall stood a magnificent 6-foot-tall wooden sculpture carved from a single block of ancient English oak. It depicted a soaring falcon breaking free from an intricate, thorn-covered cage, its wings polished to a breathtaking, liquid sheen. It was titled, The Sanctuary. A prominent art critic from the New York Times stood before it, wiping a tear from his eye, murmuring to his colleague, "It's extraordinary. The emotional raw power in the grain. She's the most brilliant young sculptor this city has seen in a decade." I stood near the entrance of the exhibition, wearing an elegant floor-length ivory silk gown. My hair was styled in loose, radiant waves, my skin glowing with health, peace, and absolute confidence. Around my neck sat a simple, breathtaking platinum pendant holding a rare, raw, yellow diamond, a gift from Theo's mother on the day our wedding date was set. An arm wrapped gently around my waist from behind, pulling me back against a broad, warm chest. I leaned back comfortably against Theo, smelling his familiar, comforting scent of cedar and rain. "They just sold the falcon sculpture," Theo whispered into my ear, his deep voice sending a pleasant shiver down my spine. "A museum in London bought it for $800,000. I laughed softly, turning around in his arms to look up into his handsome, devoted face. $800,000? I teased. "That's almost enough to buy a Birkin bag." Theo smiled, that warm, private, beautiful smile reserved only for me. He reached out, his long fingers gently tucking a stray strand of hair behind my ear. "You can have 100 Birkin bags if you want them, Mrs. Astor," he murmured. "Or you can carve 100 more falcons. Whatever you want, the world is yours." "I don't need bags, Theo," I smiled, wrapping my arms around his neck, looking into eyes that held my whole universe. "I already have everything I ever wanted." Across the crowded gallery floor, near the public entrance, two figures stood outside on the sidewalk behind the glass doors. John Davis stood in a threadbare, rumpled coat. He had avoided prison through a plea bargain that required him to liquidate all his personal assets to pay back the $400,000 he had stolen from my trust. He now worked as a mid-level clerk at a small logistics firm, living in a cramped studio in Queens. Beside him stood Bella. Her fragile act was completely gone. She wore cheap, outdated clothes, her face gaunt, her eyes hollow and bitter. After serving 3 months of community service for fraud and being blacklisted by every social circle in New York, she worked night shifts at a call center. And a few feet away from them, standing alone in the rain, was Colin Carmichael. He had been demoted to a desk researcher at his father's firm, his reputation ruined, his engagement prospects dead. The three of them stood outside in the cold spring rain, looking through the crystal-clear glass windows of the warm, illuminated gallery. They watched the girl they had stripped of everything, the girl they had left in the cold, the girl they had called greedy, petty, and worthless, standing at the apex of the art world, wrapped in the arms of the most powerful man in the state, glowing like pure, unbroken gold. I caught their reflection in the glass for a fraction of a second. I didn't glare. I didn't smile in triumph. I didn't feel anger, nor did I feel pity. I simply turned my back on the cold glass, took Theo's hand, and stepped forward into the bright, warm sunlight of my own life.